Hello, this is Lorenzo. You're watching a mission a day, and today is the historic mission number 40, so the 40th day with the 40th mission. We are continuing our exploration of the Joule system, and we are currently focused on the Val Explorer number 2, our unmanned lander that's en route to Val. You can see we are almost at our encounter with Joule. It's actually 45 days more, but fortunately we have time acceleration to make that a little bit more quick. We are doing a 14 meter per second burn in just under 2 minutes to adjust the plane that we will be entering the Joule system, so that we will not have to do a costly inclination correction to meet up with Val. Now today is Tuesday, and if all went well, today also marked the release of the Point 23 upgrade to Kerbal Space Program. I hope you have had a wonderful time playing with that today. I'm actually recording this on Monday here, so I have no idea yet how well, or indeed if at all, that release will happen. And of course I will be doing a lot with that as well. If all goes well today, I might spend the Tuesday to at least attempt a return mission of the brave Kerbonauts that have explored the Joule system, and then move on to Point 23 myself for the videos. What form that will take remains to be seen, of course, depending on mod compatibility and indeed stay safe compatibility. So stay tuned for that. I can't really tell you too much about that at this point. Let's have a look if we burn slightly more. No, that's going more wrong. Maneuver nodes are nice and all, but still there's no replacing just looking at the nav ball, performing small burns and seeing how your orbit changes. Here I'm now looking at the plane of the ejection trajectory after we see Joule, and if that is in the plane with the ecliptic of the solar system, that means that our path around Joule will also be nice and flat. So I'm just gently pulsing the engine here to make that as flat as possible. We're now set for a periapsis of 11,000 kilometers, which is just great. So I'm going to go ahead and time accelerate to that point. One other thing you might have been missing in this series so far is the mentioning of the extra money credits that your views and subscriptions are giving the space program. This is because I'm just forgetting, since these days we just launch missions from vessels that are still in progress. They don't need to be launched, so they effectively have already been paid for. If I can remember it, I will mention it tomorrow, and we might even have to launch something tomorrow. Anyway, let me take this opportunity as well to welcome all the new subscribers. There are around 5 or 6 of you. Thanks for subscribing, obviously, and I hope you enjoy the videos, this one and from here on out. Currently at 92 subscribers, and I'm looking forward to breaking that 100 mark. It's a small milestone, but definitely a milestone. I will make sure to drink a beer for that. Now comes the mandatory check to look at Joule, whether we are going to orbit in the right direction, in the same direction as the moons, in fact. And look at that, we are actually not doing that. So we should put our periapsis at the other side of Joule, because if we come in from this way and the moons are going that way, we will have a hard time meeting up with them. This is actually what happened to the Val Explorer 1 a few missions back, and that made things horrible. So we're going to do a burn, and we're just going to make that a anti-normal burn, or a normal burn, so to move our periapsis to the other side of Joule. Fairly easy. Let's see. The trajectories are going nuts, and we are currently slated to just impact Joule. That's of course not a good idea either. We should just increase this by a little bit. Oh, my maneuver node is going nuts as well. That's why it's being difficult. So something with the maneuver nodes here around Joule that make them go nuts. Anyway, I'm just going to use it for the directional marker and then burn in that direction, because we can do the tried and proven trick of burning whilst looking at the map view. It's my favorite way of changing a trajectory anyway. All the fiddling with maneuver nodes is well, it's useful, but it's not always the best solution for the job. So to recap the mission while I do this, this is the unmanned lander that is going to attempt a landing on Val. Yesterday, Bob gallivanted around the Joule system with his tiny orbiter. He even managed to set it down on pole, which was not planned, but which was a nice twist to the mission nonetheless. In doing so, and in looking for his nuclear engine that had gotten lost, he did burn up a sizable amount of fuel. So there's still some fuel left in the space station, but it's not quite a lot. So today we are first going to rendezvous with the station, and then we are going to see about... there we go. We have a periapsis of 2,000 kilometers, that's fine, and we are going to brake at that point. First we are going to pass through Tylo's Sphere of Influence, but that should be a very short encounter. Anyway, so we have a little bit of a fuel crisis. Hopefully we can get to the station, refuel this lander. The landing is the objective of paramount importance. Any fuel left over after that will be used to get back to Kerbin, obviously. And to do this, I brought a flight computer on the space station, and that means that when we reassemble it in some kind of configuration for going home, it will tell us the amount of delta V we have, and we can make an educated guess as to whether or not that will be enough. If so, then we can just depart, but if not, we might have to either send a refueling ship all the way from Kerbin. That will take years, but that doesn't matter because on board the space station our Kerbals have amenities to live. I just decided that. Or what we could do is send the Kethane miner that's currently lounging on Minmus, send that to come over here to Val, where it can then refine more fuel in situ for the mission. So I've not decided which it's going to be. First, let's see if we can get on with a landing here. We have a 1400 meters per second burn coming up to get us in a Julian orbit. That's quite a long burn, but I think this nuclear powered lander has it in it, no worries. I'm going to perform that burn, and I will see you around Joule when we are in the vicinity of our space station, because no need to review all these burns. If you want to see rocket burns, go see a few of the previous episodes. They are full of them. So see you in a bit when we are near the station. And here we are around Val, orbiting Joule, ready to rendezvous with the Val station. Let's set it as a target, and you can see I already managed to match the inclination pretty much perfectly. We have a encounter setup. Well, it's not quite an encounter, there's 1200 kilometers of separation, and the small problem is that we are out of fuel. One thing that's consistently happening is that I overestimate the amount of delta V we get from a craft and underestimate the amount we actually need for operations in the Joule system. Fortunately, not all is lost. On the station there is some fuel, and there is a vehicle that will get one of the astronauts to the lander, which will then proceed to land. So let's switch to that station now. Unfortunately, that will mean re-enabling the lag fest that we've all come to love and enjoy. Today is Tuesday, the 17th of December. And I already mentioned point 23 is going to be released later today, or when you're watching this video it probably has been released, so this lag should hopefully be a thing of the past. Now, looking at this station, the fuel module here is obsolete, as is this electrical module. It carries spare xenon gas, but the probe that uses it has crashed, so that's not going to be used anymore. The Kethane scanners here, they are useful, but they might as well be operated robotically. This vessel here carries a lot of science, but also a lot of weight. This one here has already done the science, and there are soil samples from Pol in this module, so this one has to return to Kerbin. What I'm going to do now is take this lander again, rendezvous with the I call it a lander, then I'm going to take this module, rendezvous with the Val lander, take as much fuel as we can on this, and then set down on Val. Then that lander, which then also will have soil samples, will dock with this vessel, and that combination will head home for Kerbin. So a little bit of jiggery pokery, as you might call it, but now we are first going to reassemble this thing, put the fuel in it, grab one other nuclear engine from the station, because we want that efficiency even for our transfers in this vicinity. And I'm going to switch around Bob and Bill Kerman, because of course Bob, or rather Bill, who is this then? Bob already went to Pol, so it wouldn't be quite fair if he also got to go to Val. So we have to take Bill to Vol. That means we are leaving Bob in space here for a second, dangerous as though that is. And we are now going to EVA. Hey, there we are, look, they're together in space. You wouldn't really do that. Don't go in, you wouldn't really do that, getting both your astronauts out on a spacewalk, because who's going to fix it if something goes wrong with the spacecraft? But fortunately, this is a game and we can muck about as much as we want. So let's put our good friend Bill in this capsule here. Board, and now we can switch back to Bob, and he gets to get into the command module and lounge until everything is ready for departure. Or if we are indeed that low on fuel, we might never depart and this might be his tomb forever, you know? Things can happen, you're not always prepared for anything. So let's board that, and now I'm going to transfer the fuel, do the nuclear engine stuff. I'm not going to show you that, that's just boring, we've did it before. If you want to see that, look at one of my previous episodes. So see you in the reassembled spacecraft. So here we are, safely away from the station at 16 kilometers. We have Bill Kerman in the used Pole Lander / Orbiter module that will meet up with the Vol Explorer. Now what we have to do here is match up two elliptical orbits. This big elongated one is the Vol Explorer. This blue one is our orbit. Now I don't know exactly the most efficient way to match up with orbits like these, because we not only have to modify our Barry and apoapses, we also have to shift their places. So what I did, I went for this maneuver node. It modifies our orbit here, enlarges it a bit, meets with the station here at 10 kilometers, and then there I'm going to perform the burn to put us in this orbit, and hopefully that is not too horribly inefficient. I think it should be fine. It's about 112 meters per second for this burn, and then I'm estimating another times that amount once we get there. Burning now, and as you see, I opted not to take the nuclear engine. This is because the small Rockomax engine has 350 seconds of specific impulse, whereas the nuclear engine has 800. Nuclear engine is clearly more efficient, but it's also rather heavy, and on a very small craft like this, that might cancel out any gains, especially because we are only performing a few hundred meters per second of delta V with this engine, which is not a lot. I'm not sure if that logic is in fact foolproof. Everything is going horribly wrong. I kept burning and our intersection has turned out to be lower. Wait. This has gone terribly wrong. So let's have a look at the fuel. We didn't spend too much fuel, fortunately, but it did botch up the trajectory pretty bad. Let's have a look if we can make a... Yeah, we can make an encounter again from apoapsis here. I don't know exactly what went wrong actually, because from the maneuver node everything looked fine and dandy, and then after a bit it didn't anymore. So what happened there? I don't know. So let's have a look here. How close we can get these two markers. 66 kilometers. Ooh, it's very fine game this is. Let's have a look. 48 kilometers. $15 kilometers. I'm going to settle for that. It's only 15 meters per second more, so not a horrible amount. Anyway, you can see where this is going. In the end, we will make it, and therefore I'm going to cut till when we are at the Vol Explorer. See you then. So here we are coming into dock with the Vol Explorer. At least I'm assuming it will be a straightforward docking, because these are two small vessels. They are nimble and have no problems maneuvering around one another. I'm going to pass underneath the docking port, hopefully, at least not collide with it, slow down and gently nudge it into a docking. Then we're going to transfer all the fuel and of course Bill himself to the lander. He will have to warm up that ice cold seat. It has been piloted by a robot for 1.5 years, and then he can take this craft, never tested, to the surface of Val. Our goal since almost the beginning of this series. We've done science, we've unlocked technology trees, we have forged our way forward and are now coming up into the ultimate conclusion of this effort, and let's hope it goes well. Incidentally, the fuel we are carrying here is all the fuel that's remaining in the Joule system. There is not a drop left on the station or indeed anywhere else but in this little vessel, so we have one shot and that is about it. So this is a very slanted approach. Let's take this spacecraft here and turn that a little bit so that the approach might be a bit better. So turning on the SAS, switching back to Bob's craft, and there we go, picture perfect docking almost, if it wasn't for the colliding and the crashing. Let's have a look. At least the docking ports are aligned almost. I can hit this SAS and give us a small bit of thrust. This is a very haphazard docking. For all my talk of final chances, cultivation of years of research and stuff, this is a very, very sloppy approach. Anyway, it doesn't matter, we're going slowly, so nothing is liable to break, at least I don't think so. And we can probably just grab the vessel here. Problem is that this one doesn't have any thrust, so any grabbing will have to be done from Bill's vessel. Let's switch back to that one. And of course this one doesn't have any RCS, which would be nice to be able to reverse. But none of these luxuries are available to us. We just have to point at the docking port. Yeah, we're now at a right angle to it. That's not going to work. We're going to have to redo this attempt. So, giving it a dab of thrust the other way, so that we may try again. There's no shame in admitting failure. If something doesn't work out, you inch back, abort, and try again. So, let's do it properly this time. First by zeroing out the velocity. Try to do it like a cowboy, and that never works. You zero out the velocity first, 0 meters per second, and then you align the docking port with the other ship like so, switch to the other ship and repeat that alignment. Let's have a look. So now they should be more or less facing each other, disregarding any rotation induced off-centerness, but that doesn't matter in ships that are this small. Then you switch back to the vessel that has an engine, dab the throttle for 0.5 meters per second, and off you go to a perfect docking. At least that's the theory of it all. You use your azimuth indicator to point to the target, and you hope that your velocity vector indicator is also on the target. That means you're pointing at it and you're going there. Small deviations are usually not a problem, because then the magnets of the docking clamps will correct for that. But as you could see just a few seconds ago, if you come in too slanted, even that won't work. So with the docking like this and coming in nice and straight, there should be little to no problems, and indeed here we are. There we are, docked. So now I'm going to transfer all the fuel and Bill, and I'm going to make that little pause for you because that could take a while. Actually, here we are again. I have a little trick I want to share with you for balancing fuel. Look, in this lander here we have one central tank that's now full, and we have 4 radial tanks. All of them have 90 liquid fuel capacity, and in our tank here we have 118 left. As you can see, that's not enough to fill more than 2 of these tanks. We could fill one and we have a little bit left over. Obvious problem here is the balancing of these 4 tanks, because well, how are we going to balance them? You can't. At least not easily. You could divide 120 by 4 and you get 30 each, but in this diagram, in this way, it's rather hard to fill 30. Actually, it's going really slowly, so that should be easy. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the liquid fuel in this tank and all the oxidizer in the opposite tank. They are not the exact same masses, but it's like a 10 to 11 ratio, so it's almost the same. And what that should do is to distribute the weight of these unbalanced fuels at least well enough so that any SAS systems can well compensate for that. Now we can do it with these 2 tanks, and then we have a little bit left over here, and then we just repeat the trick for the tanks on the other axis. the fuel system is smart enough to grab the oxidizer from the one tank and burn it with the fuel from the other tank, so there's no losses there. And this is a quick and dirty trick of balancing your lander when you have inconvenient amounts of fuel. I'm aware that there's also a mod that balances the fuel. I've not played around with that, but for all but the most complicated setups you can balance your fuel using this trick fairly well. So far it's worked out well for me. Of course, you'll see that now immediately the fuel system will go nuts because I now have 4 instead of 2 and just flush all the fuel out into space, but so far that has not happened yet. So with all the fuel transferred, we can disconnect the vessels again, undock that, and then we can EVA Bill for his little hop over to the lander. So he will have to turn around, but that's no problem because he's a spaceman and he knows up and down are just concepts, they are not facts of life. So let us approach the docking port. The environment should be familiar to him. It's the same kind of capsule, just this one has been in space for a while yet. So let's check out the systems here. The engine is active, nuclear reactor is looking good, we have some fuel but not a whole lot of it. All in all, we are set for landing. Oh, we can ask the engineer how much delta V we have. 2.5 kilometers per second. That should be enough for a landing, I dare say. So I'm going to put it in a landing trajectory, and I will see you when that's done. So this is Bill here, coming in for a landing on Val. We are in the ship. We can tell it has 2300 meters per second of delta V. We're at 20 kilometers altitude now, going at 900 meters per second, so we need to cancel that, and then we have about a kilometer per second to fight gravity and set us down. That should be more than enough. We're currently on a trajectory with a 7.8 kilometer periapsis, fairly low, and we are now at 19 kilometers. This is an altitude that doesn't let us time warp anymore, so we're just going to have to stick it out. It won't take too long because we are falling at about 100 meters per second. Most of the velocity is horizontal, and that is what we are going to cancel out in a bit. Let's ask Bill here for a crew report. Let's see what he has to say about the situation. Just 6.3 science point, not terribly much. Perhaps his opinion will change when he's on the outside of the craft. So here, giving us his EVA report. Not a lot going on there. We all did this before, and now he's going to climb back inside his capsule to prepare for landing. Coming up on 14 kilometers altitude, and that's incidentally the altitude that the Chinese lander orbited the moon at for a while, or at least the orbit was at 100 kilometers by 15, allowing them to get some telemetry in before actually landing. Coming up on our periapsis here, I'm going to light the engine and start slowing down. This nuclear engine, while efficient, doesn't have a lot of thrust, so it will take quite a while to scrub off all this velocity, this 800-900 meters per second. So best to start it soon. While we do this, while we decrease our speed, we will of course be attracted by the moon, causing us to lose more altitude. Fortunately, we're 10 kilometers up still, so that should not be a problem. And I'm going to take off most of our horizontal speed here. Now, what I did with the fuel balancing has imbalanced the craft a little bit, and the automatic systems almost balance it, almost compensate for that, but not quite. So I'm having to do a little bit of steering. I hope that won't be a problem upon the actual landing, but this is a very wide base, so it should be fine. Got almost half of the horizontal speed off now. Bill is looking very scared. He's looking around quite like he doesn't have any idea what he's doing, and probably he does not, but he's the one that's going to plant a flag in a bit, take the soil samples, and probably live here on Val for about a year, because as you remember, this is all the fuel we have, 140 units as of now, and I hope what we will have left will be enough to get us into an orbit. If not, well, if not, he would crash upon trying, but if it doesn't look convincing, then we'll have to wait for a shipment of fuel or a miner from Kerbal, and that would be at least a year from now. So I hope for Bill's sake that this capsule is comfortable. We can see the ground now, it's coming up rather alarmingly fast, but we have almost cancelled our velocity and are now starting to pitch up. So the plane under us here looks fairly flat. I'm going to pitch up more steeply because it would be a shame to crash now. And our vertical velocity is rather fast indeed. So that's almost cancelled the vertical component there. And we can pitch back over to kill that horizontal. We're good on fuel for the landing at any rate, but I'm not completely confident that this will in fact be enough to also take off. Actually, that should be fine, because we started with 200 units, we're just halfway through that fuel now. We've almost landed, and of course the second half of your fuel gives you a lot more delta V, because you don't have to lift that first half of the fuel, if that makes any sense. It's now time to deploy our landing gear. It's quite small for a vessel this size, but then again we hadn't researched or unlocked the larger one, so Bill has to do it with the small legs. Should be fine. Everything so far is looking fine. We have our shadow there coming down at 10 meters per second. I'm going to reduce that to approximately 5, and that should be something that this lander can easily deal with. So far so good. Everything looking nominal for Kerbalkind's first steps on the surface of Val. Trained for this, or well trained, we prepared for this in numerous missions, and now it does look like we're finally going to do it. It is a few more meters. We're touching down on a plane that's about 3 kilometers above nominal mean altitude, what we can call sea level, to flare the engine so that we touch down at a slow speed indeed. 2 meters per second, 3, let's see, here we go, touchdown on Val. Picture perfect landing on a flat slope. It looks a lot like the moon around Kerbin, except that it is a little bluish. So before we are going to send this guy outside, let's do some science experiments and see how much points that would give us. The mystery goo from Val gives us 120 points, and remember, these are things that will be taken back to Kerbin as well. So we can transmit it, but no, scratch that. We're just going to transmit everything, because while this vessel is going to return to the Kerbin sphere of influence, it is probably not going to land because it has no heat shields or anything of that sort. So that would be a hairy attempt, to say the least. The material bay gives us 300 science points, nothing to scoff at, and I dare say that our science team back at home at Kerbin is having a veritable science point party, because the last couple of days we've been sending them a lot of data and I haven't visited them at all, so we can probably max out the tech tree in one go. So let's do some gravity scans. That's another couple 100 points. Do that one twice as we want to do. Let's see if we can do a atmospheric scan. No pressure data, no atmosphere, so that makes sense. And we can of course do a seismic scan as well. Sensors detect signs of cryovolcanism along the surface. Cryovolcanism, if you didn't know, is like when supercooled fluids erupt on a very cold surface. So for instance, this happens on Enceladus, Saturn's moon, and apparently here as well, where you have a icy surface with possibly liquid water below that, which is heated by possibly tidal effects or radioactive decay from the moon or the planet itself. And then that liquid water erupts and it behaves much like lava or magma does on Earth, because it's has such a high temperature difference. So even though it's very cold, it behaves as though it is lava. So that's cryovolcanism for you. Right. The lander has now run out of power and we're still trying to transmit as much as we can. It's no worry though. We have a data storage buffer, and as long as the solar panels generate energy in due time, all the science will be transmitted. Going for the thermometer now, not as much points as the seismic or the gravioli sensor, but still worthwhile points. Let's have a look at the temperature here. It is minus 53 C. That's quite warm actually for a atmosphere-less moon on the fringes of the solar system, so rather temperate climate here. So going to time accelerate to transmit all this data home, and when that has happened, let's have a look, we can send Bill outside. So Before doing that, let's check the flight computer. We have 1200 meters per second of delta V left. This is more or less exactly half of what we used to land, so we could probably just get in orbit with what we have here. That makes a hypothetical refueling mission a lot easier. So for now though, let's take Bill Kerman outside and let him do some science. So we didn't bring any ladders or structure. He's just going to have to float down on his jetpack, which is strong enough to lift him back up again. That's always good to know, otherwise he would be trapped here. So let's put a historic flag and write something appropriately poetic on it. Like Val, bitches. I think that's a good thing to write on that. Look, you can walk on it. The gravity is about, I think, somewhere near half of that of Kerbin. No, less. A third, maybe. It's not as low as the moon, but it's definitely low because we can fly on our jetpack, and the jumping is fairly high. Look, you can do high jumps and then fly off on the jetpack. So, going to take, yeah, and if you hit the ground while you're going very fast, you will fall over. That's a lesson that Bill just learned. Anyway, what I was trying to say, we're going to take a soil sample a little bit away from the lander so that our engine won't have disturbed the soil. Nothing like that is modeled in the game, but that doesn't really matter. You take a surface sample and keep that for returning to Kerbin, and of course an EVA report. The surface occasionally rumbles beneath you. You think you should probably get back to the ship. Well, let's do exactly that. Get back to the ship, get inside of it, and then wait for rescue, because one thing I can tell you, 1200 meters per second, or this 120 units of fuel. How much do we have? Oh, can't see it now, obviously we're not in the ship. Anyway, the amount of fuel we have is definitely not enough to take these people home from Joule, not by a long shot. So tomorrow we will see a refueling mission. I'm actually recording the second part of the mission on Tuesday, which happens to be the day of the release of point 23, as I have mentioned a lot of times already. But it has not been released yet, so maybe we're facing a delay, or maybe it's just happening later today. Anyway, when that happens, of course, I have to sort out what to do about that, how to continue the series. Rest assured that I will, but you could face a few days with no videos, or there might be weird videos with glitches and malfunctions. Anyway, no real predicting that. Anyway, I'm going to leave you today with this site, a lander on Val, the mission, the goal that we had been striving for weeks and months. Indeed, we did achieve it today, and tomorrow we will see about getting Bill and Bob home, something that's of course important as well. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm Lorenzo, and I'll see you tomorrow.